Obviously, Delta West, I think, does care very strongly about their community. They are very community driven. Um, and additionally, they are very academically driven. I would say like those two are probably their biggest core values.
Hi, it's Brian Master, and today we're talking with Thomas Lijnse. He's a graduate of Delta West. What have you been doing since you graduated from Delta West?
Uh, that's a good question. That's a number of years. So I went immediately to the University of Calgary, and I started my Bachelor's of Science in Engineering with major in electrical engineering and a specialization in biomedical engineering. Did an internship with oil and gas company, and I actually finished my undergrad degree a year and a half ago. And I started a graduate degree in biomedical engineering. I'm actually in 2 weeks starting my PhD.
Wow, that's amazing. And biomedical engineering, obviously the medical field. How does that work?
It's an interesting one. It's probably one of the broadest fields I've ever had the opportunity to study in.
Hmm.
Um, I have a lot of colleagues, and my colleagues work on everything from developing stem cell therapies to um, what I currently do is developing microneedles for painless drug delivery, and I have colleagues who develop neural interfaces, do bone modeling. It's a very broad field.
It sounds fascinating, though, and the engineering aspect of it combined with the medical aspect of it must be quite fulfilling for you.
Yes, absolutely. It's quite fulfilling and also a lot of study.
Sorry, where was your post-secondary education?
University of Calgary, and actually I'm still doing my PhD at the University of Calgary.
And the PhD will be in biomedical. Is
Yes,
that the proper term?
yes, biomedical engineering.
Wow. So you've been busy since you graduated from Delta West, obviously.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Do you think Delta West influenced your choice of university or the area that you chose to study in?
Um, I wouldn't say so much the choice of university. I mean, obviously there was a sort of a bias there. Staying in Calgary was easier for me, but absolutely my choice of program. I was a very academically inclined student, and I really liked math and physics. And
Hmm.
I remember having a conversation with, I believe she was my chemistry teacher at the time, and essentially I said, maybe I'll just do physics in university. I like physics so much, and she just went like, no, I don't think you do that. I think honestly you like the applications too much. I liked messing around with the technology too much, and she said, well, because I believe her husband was an engineer, she said you should really look into engineering, and that's actually how I ended up going into engineering.
Are you happy you did?
Oh, I'm very happy I did. It's one of the best decisions I ever made.
If you were to write a resume listing your experiences and accomplishments and interests while you were at Delta West, what would it say?
Experiences, accomplishments. It's an interesting one. Uh, I think first ones first. I would probably start with like academics. I would say across the board a fairly academically inclined student. Some of my teachers at the time may disagree with me. Um, the big one was I really tried to take on a lot of leadership and volunteering opportunities. Um, so I was on like the sort of student council that there is. I was a part of the number of clubs, and then outside of the school, I was also part of Scouts Canada, and I took on a lot of leadership opportunities there.
What extracurricular activities were you involved in at Delta West?
Um, Scouts Canada was the big one.
Yeah.
I was a member of Scouting for close to probably 15 years, I think.
Wow.
Um, Outside of that, I was on a number of sports teams. So I played basketball, I played rugby. Um, that pretty much sums up most of my
Rug-
experience during Delta West. Yeah.
Rugby's a great game.
Yeah.
Love watching it. What would you say, Thomas, was your proudest memory of the school? The one thing that stands out?
I would say in a weird manner of speaking, it actually happened after I graduated. Um, I, as well as many other alumni, would occasionally go back and visit the school after we graduated. Um, and I went back probably about 2 years after I had graduated, and just to see a couple of the teachers I had kept in contact with. And there was a lot of students who were, all ranges of ages, who came up to me and said hi, and they're like, "Oh, I heard what you're doing at university. How's university? Like, I remember you." And it was oddly sort of like kind of inspiring. It just reminded me how much of a close knit community there is in the school.
That's an interesting term, close-knit community. We'll get to that a little bit further on. What subjects did you prefer and excel
Um,
at Delta
math,
West? Yeah.
math and physics. um, I actually had beyond like math, physics, chemistry. I did have a really big interest in both languages and
Hmm.
social studies. Not English, just like French. I took French and Spanish, uh, and social studies as well. And I would say that honestly, the biggest interest from that came partially because I'm already bilingual, and partially because the teachers for those courses were fantastic and actually really inspired a lot of interest in the subject.
And it's funny you should say that because you in turn probably inspired people, as you mentioned, when you went back to Delta West a couple of years after. Funny how that circle keeps going. If you had to choose one thing, Thomas, just one thing, it's going to be tricky again, I think. What did you appreciate most about attending Delta West?
The one thing I really appreciated about Delta West was just like, so it was the small classes, but not for the usual reason that small classes are appreciated. I mean, obviously I did like sort of the almost close to one-on-one education I got, but the small classes that we had really enabled the school to be able to have opportunities for the students that typically wouldn't be available to larger classes. So we did a lot of travel. So I remember traveling actually to as part of the school. We traveled to Cuba, where we
Nice.
had a week to really involve ourselves in like the Spanish language while also doing a lot of volunteering. So we worked with an orphanage. We worked with a musical school in downtown Havana. Um, we traveled to Los Angeles. This was a couple years before. We traveled to Los Angeles, and I got an opportunity with a small group to attend the U.S. National Holocaust Museum
Wow.
and talk to Holocaust survivors and people involved in running the museum. So we really got a lot of opportunities also within Alberta, but I'll skim over those. I mean, we got a lot of opportunities that normally wouldn't be available to schools with larger classes.
If we can just step back a sec and try and see Delta West as objectively as possible, and to the best of your knowledge, in your mind, what most differentiates Delta West from other schools that a family might choose instead?
Hmm.
What sets it apart?
Um, One of the biggest things to me, and the thing I've actually received sort of the most comments on when I talk about my high school education with other people I met in university, is just the whole concept of a kindergarten to grade 12 school in a city. They're a little bit more common in rural communities, but the idea of like a kindergarten to grade 12 school in Calgary, where I actually had a little note written down for later, kind of called like, I forget how they termed it internally, but the sort of vertical integration where you would have students who are, upper years, maybe grades 10 to 12, and the idea being that you would interact with and mentor younger generations within the school. It's a really unique aspect of Delta West that I think really sets it apart from other schools.
The way you describe it, it sounds like the um, the way the school's set up. There's an inspiration model built in.
Absolutely, yeah. You have your grade 1 to 3, and they sort of look up to the grades 4 through 6,
Hmm.
and they look up to those in junior high, and they look up to those in high school, and it is very like you can sort of see, where you want to be, and not just, hear about it from other people who are at a higher age. You can really like see and meet the people.
And as you mentioned earlier on, you felt it when you went back, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
As Bob Dylan once wrote, you can do nothing finer than inspire someone. So that's a great model for Delta West. Okay, we're gonna have some fun with this one. Say Delta West was going to become personified. Delta West was going to be a person, a single person that we want to get to know. I'd like you to describe Delta West, the person, in 3 words.
I would definitely, one of the first words that comes to mind is sort of like caring. The school has a very good community, and they also, at least when I was attending, they had a number of volunteering programs where, we gave back to the community. We spent time volunteering with old folks' homes and nearby schools. There's a nearby school for people with developmental disabilities. So there is very much a sense of like community and giving back within the school.
Hmm.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say, intelligent. Like there's very good academic programming at the school, and I don't mean strictly within, your classic math, science, English, social studies. They really did take the opportunity to teach in languages and art and
Hmm.
the dramatic arts as well, and get like a really well-rounded education for students. In sort of an odd sense, like friendly.
Hmm.
I mean, as always, I will say this with a preface, like as always, um, when you have schools, you have, children, teenagers, there will always be, personality conflicts. But all in all, it was quite a friendly and accepting school. We had a wide diversity of people, and there was a lot of like really good friendships. And there was a very respectful, like, relationship also between like students of multiple ages, but also between students and administration, students and the teachers. Like it was a fairly like welcoming place.
Excellent answer. What would you say Delta West's highest values are in actual practice?
I would personally say I wouldn't say they're that much different. I mean, obviously Delta West, I think, does care very strongly about their community. They are very community driven. Um, and additionally, they are very academically driven. I would say like those two are probably their biggest core values. Is they care about having like a good learning environment and stressing the education of also like leadership and giving back to your community.
Think about what students and families are going to find surprising about Delta X. So like when you were there, what was there any one or two things that surprised you your time there?
I don't know if I would be necessarily surprised by this, but definitely one of the big things is that you know the school does lack some of the programming that bigger schools can provide. Such as a sort of more syndicated band program or large sports teams, simply because
Hmm.
the numbers just aren't there. Um, all said and done within that, like I mean, the school did put together actually quite a large effort. I remember like there were sort of intermittent sports teams and at least like programming that you could attend. So I mean, it was sort of a fact of the matter that a smaller school just doesn't have some of the same programming the larger schools have, but they did try their best to provide the education opportunities and the extracurricular opportunities.
Describe for me, if you can, how you remember students relating to one another. Like first of all, what's a typical Delta West student? What are they like?
Even within that, I think it's very hard to say. Like I said, there was for being such a small school, there was a wide diversity of students. Um, sort of middle ground, honestly, the people that attended Delta West, they tended to be passionate, is what I would have to say. Like it's not one of those schools where everyone is incredibly smart and is going into math and sciences and whatnot. Um, but for every student that was incredibly dedicated to the study of physics, there was another student who was incredibly passionate about um, art and drama. Like we have previous students who became costume designers because that was what they were passionate about.
Wow.
One of my friends became a graphic designer, and another one of my friends became a neuroscientist. Like
Wow.
it's a very diverse
Diverse.
round of students. But yeah, I would say every student is very passionate about something.
And well, you talk about this different diversity in the courses that your friends say were involved in, and how was the chat of biomedical engineering taking on a chat with somebody who's doing costume design?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that comes down to sort of the relationships that are fostered within the school and the sort of the
Uh,
attitude that the school takes towards um, students and their classes. Like it was always very much like, oh, what are you doing? Oh, that's super cool. It's really interesting. There was always like you could understand where other people were coming from and where their passions were and what really drove them.
would I, without putting words in your mouth, would you say then the typical student more or less is passionate
Yeah,
about being
I
there?
yeah I would definitely say that.
I'm going to get personal with you for a sec. Do you think your experience at Delta West has shaped who you are today, right now, as a person? And if so, how?
It didn't. I mean, I spent 10 years at Delta West Academy, and I think I do owe a fair amount of who I am today to that school. Um, Obviously, everyone changes quite drastically in sort of the first, 20 odd years of their life. Um, but yeah, absolutely. Like some of the way I learn, the way I interact with people, like a sense of community giving and leadership. I think a lot of that came from my education at Delta West Academy.
If you had to choose something to change about the school, what would it be? And what would have helped you if it were different about the school?
Um, I'd say the big one looking back, honestly, and this is because I would say I attribute this to where I am today, and the work I do now. I do a lot of technology education, and I work in machine shops and I work in electrical labs. Um, I think one really big thing that Delta West was missing, and I would personally change, was there was never really options for more of that like hands-on physical learning.
Oh,
And when I say that, I mean like obviously there was like physical hands-on work within chemistry and physics, and there was the ability to like interact with um, environments and social studies and English. But when I say that, I mean more of like we never had like a shop program, never had like electronics classes, which I know, speaking to a number of other people in university, like are were things at larger schools. So I
you
mean,
you feel they could add that?
I feel like could add that. I understand that like the technicalities of it is it's a rather complex thing to have, and it tends to lend itself to larger schools with large number of students and requires proper training and whatnot. But I think, yeah, really introducing that like physical, almost I would almost say like craftsmanship sort of
Mhm.
aspect is definitely something I would love to see.
When did you graduate from, how many years has it been since you graduated from Delta West?
I graduated, I suppose, June 2014, so we're coming up on, I guess, 6 years. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how has your perspective on Delta West and the experience you learned and enjoyed there evolved over time, especially that you're no longer there?
Just given the fact that it's been quite a long time, I have sort of lost that feeling of, what was the everyday like in the school. I don't recall much of the day to day. What really sticks with me is like the bigger things within the school. My broad scale experiences on how they impacted my education. Um, the opportunities I received to travel and learn abroad. So obviously it's sort of I'm looking back on it on a sort of bulk scale. I don't sort of remember the every day. was that standard teenager of, I think when I graduated, I was like, oh, I never want to go back. It's like terrible. I have to go to school every day. I have to wake up at 7 a.m. to go to school. It's awful. It's a big change to university when suddenly I had classes that didn't start until 11 some days and I got to sleep in. But obviously, yeah, like once you sort of remove all that, and I'm left with the bigger picture of the school, and I'm extraordinarily happy with my education.
Oh, that's great to hear. Would you recommend other students enroll in Delta West?
I'd say yes. I mean, like obviously, I've said a lot of very positive things about the school, and I absolutely am happy I went there. I think it's also important to address that it is a smaller school, which does lend itself to uh, you know lack in certain programming, like maybe sports teams or larger systems, and a little bit of a lessened, like it's a tighter knit environment, but it is less of that social environment that students receive at larger schools. And I know that isn't necessarily for everyone. Like some people thrive in the larger environments. And I would say one of the biggest things is that it can, like I mentioned, that like students are passionate, but they're passionate about different things. It can sometimes be quite difficult to be one of the only people in a class who is passionate about a subject. Right? So to be the one person in a physics class who really well and truly cares about physics, or the one person in an art class who really, really wants to be there. And I'm not saying that happened often, but it did happen from time to time. And losing that sort of, a peer connection and that academic challenge from your peers is definitely something that could be impactful to students.
Interesting. Well, having said that, continuing on with the positive aspects of it, what would you say if you can name, say, 3 big reasons why someone should go to Delta West?
Everything's kind of a double-edged sword. I think some of the biggest reasons to ever enroll there would be those small class sizes. Like I remember distinctly almost some of the one-on-one interactions I had with teachers, and how much that shaped my education, and how much I could learn, but also learn how to learn from direct interaction. I think that was a fantastic reason. Um, yeah, the opportunities that are provided, those volunteering opportunities that I worked with at nearby schools and care homes, programs where we could have a class go out camping essentially. With those sizes, I mean, those are incredible opportunities that I know just aren't available to everyone. And Ben, I would say that tight knit community. I mean, I'm still friends with a number of people who I didn't even necessarily graduate with, like people who were a year or two below me.
Wow.
So when I graduated, they were in grade 10, and I still am in contact with them. And I still speak to them, and that's
Great
not something
feeling.
you see. Yeah.
Yeah. Outside of those 3 reasons, say we have a family gathered around here. Is there anything you'd say to a family considering Delta West right now and what they should know?
I would say if I really had to sort of sum it up into like a sentence or two, I would say that like the opportunities within the school, academic, leadership, community, whatever, the opportunities are just fantastic, and it's probably one of the best places to receive an education. But I would say it's also important to, just due to some of the limitations of school, like find these places additionally outside of the school where you can gain a lot of other experiences. Like I was in Scouts Canada, I was on sports teams, and I think that really helped round out my experiences.
Excellent. And say a family was going to take a physical tour of the school, what would you draw their attention to above anything else?
It's almost an odd thing to say, but one of the big things I remember is sort of just the amount of like spaces, like in spaces where interactions can occur.
Hmm.
It's very easy for me to say now, having spent many years on a university campus and going to spend many more, and also having having seen a number of other high schools that, like a lot of the school is very much like you have the one big auditorium or the one big like entryway, and then you have just like hallways splitting off to classrooms. And I remember that one of the big things in Delta West was that sort of the hallways were less of just like a place you could walk, but they were also like a place to interact with other students. It was almost, yeah, the space has a different feel to it than a standard high school hallway,
Say you're talking, or there's a student who is enrolled at Delta West, looking at this interview, and you have a chance to give them one piece of advice before they enter the school. What would you say to that new student?
Is to really like take advantage of the opportunities that you're provided. So there's not a lot of schools out there where you can, take a leading role in helping to organize a talent show, or take a leading role in like mentoring youth, or doing community giving, or even just like starting up and running a small club. Um, with a lot of support academically, and not a lot of the stuff that gets in the way, the paperwork and whatnot. Yeah, there's a lot of opportunities available, and not all of them are immediately present of mind. But if you look a little bit past it, you can really find some incredible opportunities to take advantage of.
I get the subtext from all this is just how caring the teachers are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
it's a bit odd, but some of the some of the most like some of the people I'm most connected with actually after graduating are actually some of my teachers.